morning, everyone. How you all doing? Cool. Before I start, I'd just like to thank the organizers. Thank you for having me. And our sponsors as well. So my name is Tsatsi Mahase, and I'm a developer at Thoughtworks. And from far as I can remember, I've always been passionate about solving problems. And I saw programming as a tool to solve those problems. So today, I'll be talking to you about time traveling with Redux and Reactjs. So just by a show of hands, how many of you have worked with React before? Right, almost the whole room. Okay, cool. So one of the biggest challenges in building single-page applications is managing state. How do we manage the application state? So my presentation today will be about Redux and Reactjs, how Redux helps us to better manage our application state, and how React enables us to build components that respond well to that state. I will dive deeper into what Reactjs is and how it came to be. Then we'll move on to Redux and see how it works with the components. Then we will go through some examples. I'll take you through some examples for us to see Reactjs and Redux in action. Cool. But if there's one thing that I'd like you to take away from this presentation, I'd like you to understand how React components work with Redux. One of the frustrations I have with existing frameworks is how they encourage the separation of your view logic and your templates. You have your HTML on one side and you have the view logic living on a different side, right? So I've always wondered, is this really the separation of concerns, or is it just the separation of technologies? Because if you make changes, you're going to make changes in multiple areas. And traditionally, it might have made sense to have your templates in one place and your view logic in a different place. Because you probably have one team just dealing with your HTML and your CSS, and another team giving those templates some behavior, right? But we don't think of web applications as a collection of templates anymore. Instead, we think of web applications as a single page container that renders our different components. So coming to React, what is Reactjs? So Reactjs is a JavaScript library developed by Facebook for building user interfaces. But first, I'd like us to think, why do we even need dynamic interfaces? Why can't we just have our applications static? Well, because we need our applications to react to events, server-side events, and user events. That makes for a great user experience. Now, most JavaScript frameworks, the way they respond to these events, you would have your model state, right? Now, when your model state changes, you also have to update your UI state. And to keep the two in sync, you use data binding. I'm not sure how many of you have worked with Angular, but then you'd have something like that to keep your states in sync. But what I want us to understand is that React.js is not an MVC framework. It's not a JavaScript MVC framework. If anything, it's the V in MVC. It's just a view. Before I go deeper into explaining how the workings of React.js, I want us to first understand what a document object model is. So you're loading a page. When you load a page in your browser, that creates your DOM. Now, if you make changes to the DOM, your UI gets updated. That's how your page responds. So your browser has JavaScript APIs for making changes to that DOM. But making changes to the DOM is expensive. It's expensive in terms of performance and speed. And there's not much we can do to optimize that. So what React does is it takes your data model. When your data model changes, it uses a concept of the virtual DOM, actually. So the virtual DOM is a representation of your actual DOM. So when your data model changes, your virtual DOM also updates. Now, it would take the previous virtual DOM representation and the current virtual DOM, then compute the difference and update the DOM with that difference. This is what sets React apart from your other frameworks, other JavaScript frameworks. And this process is very fast. So moving on to Redux. So Redux is just a state container for JavaScript applications. It's not just limited to React.js. You can use it with other frameworks as well. But then to explain it a bit further, I'll go into the principles of Redux. The first principle, single source of truth. This means that the whole state of your application is stored in one place. This makes for faster development, and it's easier to debug because you know where to find your problems. Cool. Number 2, the state is read-only. So this means that whenever you want to change the state, you need to emit an action to say, I want to do this. I want to perform some form of action. And that's all you do, right? You don't make changes to the state directly. And the third one is changes are made with pure functions. What this means is your pure functions, or sometimes called reducers, they take your previous state and give out a new state. So on a project I'm currently on, to ensure that the state is not directly changed, we use immutable JS to ensure that the only way to make state changes is by producing a new state. So you have, I'm sure those of you that have worked with React and Redux before have seen this diagram. So you have a unidirectional flow of data, right? You have, to make changes, you first make an action, and that action is dispatched, and it makes changes to the state store. Then your view updates. Remember when we talked about React being able to change based on the data store changes. When our state changes, React re-renders the view. But now we also have this here. We have the reducer, which are those functions that take our previous state and give us a new state. And actions can be made from the view, and it's the same process. So I'd just like to show you a project that I'm working on. We went live last week. All right, so the project I'm currently on is called Snappy Home. It's a home services app. You get on the app and you're able to select home services from removals, the different clusters that you can choose from, and they're going to increase with time. So what we have on the side is a tool that we normally use to monitor our state. It's very handy. So I talked about the state, and I said that to change the state, first you emit an action. That action would then be dispatched, goes through our reducers, creates a new state. We don't mutate our state. We only create a new state. So I'll just show you here. When I click, you see that? That's a new state. When I click security, I get another new state. So this are actions, right? So let's go through it. I'm just gonna select cleaning. So I'm looking for cleaning. So as we move forward throughout our application state, our state remains in one place. And our actions, we can see all the actions that have taken place on that side. And one of the things I like about this tool, you can see the difference each action creates. What's the difference between my previous state and my current state? Cool. So the title of my talk was Time Traveling with Redux and Reactjs. Everything you see on this page, it's a component. In React, you think in components. And it makes for easy, it enables you to reuse your functionality. For example, all you see here is one component reused over and over again. So because we have our state in one place, one of the things that we added to the app was local storage, because we wanted to give our users good experience. We wanted our users to be able to close the app and come back and continue where they left off, which is something that's a bit tricky to do in other frameworks, because your state is all over the place. It's hard to just save one state and say, okay, when the app reloads, I can retrieve that state and the user's back where they were before. So, for example, if I close this and I come back, I can just go back to where I was before, and the answers I gave are still there. This was easy because of Redux and React. Mainly because of Redux, because our state was in one place. Now, Another thing that I'd like to show you is how easy it is to move from 1.0. Like the title of my talk is time traveling. How easy it is to move backward and forward in time with React and Redux. Cool. So if you look down here, there's a slider. The slider, I can just do this and go back in time, and I can just do this and go forward in time. So what can we take from this presentation? React.js is not an MVC framework. It is a UI library. It uses the virtual DOM to render the real DOM. And 3, Redux enforces an architectural pattern that reduces the complexity of managing your state. Right? With that said, thank you. We'll take questions from here. Thank you.
All right, so I don't know if you've heard of Vue.js. Have you heard of Vue.js?
Vue.js, I haven't used it before.
You haven't used it before? Okay, well, that's fine. Because I wanted to ask about the comparison between using React with Redux and using React. But if you haven't heard of it, then it's fine.
I guess I have. Said back.
Right, so you're using Redux dev tools, and what do you guys do for different environments? So if you have a production build as opposed to a staging or a development build, how do you make your create store to cater for that, or do you simply just add dev tools in your production build as well?
So, if I'm understanding the question right, is how do we, what tools do we use on different environments to, say we're deploying from testing to your staging? What?
Yeah, so it's mostly just, do you have a different create store for development and other environments, so you don't have dev tools available on environments where you don't want where performance to be an issue?
Oh yeah, so what we do is on prod, obviously the tools that I showed you guys, they wouldn't be available on prod. You wouldn't be able to keep track of a state. What I showed you now is what is running locally on my machine. It's probably not a good idea to have your state exposed because if, say for example, someone that has malicious intent is able to see exactly what happens on your state, they can figure out some things that you don't want them to figure out. So we disable that on, it's available on our dev environment, but then UAT and forward, we don't have any of those tools enabled. Okay, thanks everyone.